Did Z honestly think he could look Valentine in the eye after the absolute disaster that just unfolded and expect blind loyalty? Or, more importantly, did the writers genuinely believe we would sit back and accept that Valentine is simply running away to hide in the shadows like a frightened child? If you ask me, the narrative they are trying to feed us right now is not just flawed. It is a calculated move designed to distract us from the real game being played behind closed doors. We are being led to believe that Valentine is vanishing from Port Charles to escape the unforeseen fallout of his actions, but I am not buying it for a single second. The board is set, the pieces are locked in a dangerous, deadlocked game of chess, and the stakes have never been higher. If you look closely at the shattered trust within the WSB and the psychological motive driving every single player right now, you will realize that this disappearance is anything but a retreat. It is the beginning of a highly classified, off-the-books operation that could shake the very foundation of this show. To truly understand the gravity of this situation, you have to look at the absolute mess that the WSB has become. For years, we have been told that this agency is the ultimate authority, the all-seeing eye that controls every covert operation across the globe. But recent events have completely shattered that illusion. Cullum was exposed as a dirty agent manipulating the system from the inside, and it looks like he was just the tip of the iceberg. The rot runs incredibly deep. We are talking about decades of double agents, hidden agendas, and buried files. Z might be the head of the organization, but how can he possibly govern an agency where he cannot trust a single person in the room? Every time Z gives an order, there is a very real chance that it is being intercepted, altered, or sold to the highest bidder. This creates a terrifying deadlock. Z is sitting on a throne of lies, surrounded by enemies who smile at him in the boardroom. In this kind of environment, relying on standard protocols is a death sentence. He needs a ghost. He needs someone who is not bound by the rules, someone who can navigate the darkest corners of the espionage world without leaving a paper trail. This is exactly where Valentine enters the equation. If you ask me, Valentine is the only logical choice for a mission of this magnitude. He has spent his entire life mastering the art of deception. He knows how to operate without a safety net, and more importantly, he has a deep-seated psychological motive to prove his worth and secure his ultimate freedom. The idea that Valentine would just tuck his tail between his legs and run away from Port Charles goes against everything we know about his character. He is a strategist, a man who always plays 5 moves ahead. When he reached out to Z, it was not an act of desperation. It was a calculated move to position himself as the solution to Z's biggest problem. Valentine knows that the WSB is compromised, and he knows that Z is desperate. By offering his services as an off-the-books operative, Valentine is essentially making himself indispensable. He is trading his current precarious situation for a position of immense, albeit hidden power. This implies that his impending absence from Port Charles is merely a cover story, a smokescreen designed to keep the real traitors within the WSB completely in the dark. But what exactly is this top-secret mission? All roads, in my analytical opinion, lead directly back to Jason. The situation surrounding Jason is shrouded in an unprecedented level of mystery. We know he has been in custody, but the details are incredibly murky. Could it be that the WSB has completely lost track of their most valuable asset? Think about it. If the agency is heavily infiltrated by double agents, it is highly probable that a rogue faction, perhaps someone connected to Brennan, or an entirely unknown entity, has deliberately hidden the files regarding Jason. They might have relocated him to a black site that does not even exist on the official WSB grid. This means that Z, despite all his authority, might be entirely blind to where Jason truly is. The unforeseen fallout of having a weapon like Jason controlled by a rogue faction is catastrophic. Z cannot send a traditional strike team to find him, because the very agents he deploys might be the ones keeping Jason hidden. He needs a lone wolf, an apex predator who can track Jason down without triggering any internal alarms. This brings us to the fork in the road. Let us explore Scenario A, which paints Valentine as the ultimate savior of the WSB. In this scenario, it looks like Z has officially thrown out the rulebook. He brings Valentine into his inner circle, completely off the record, and assigns him the impossible task of locating and extracting Jason. Valentine becomes Z's right-hand man, the secret weapon that no one else in the agency knows about. This would explain why Valentine has to cut all ties and disappear so abruptly. He cannot afford to have anyone in Port Charles, not Carly, not Charlotte, not anyone knowing his true agenda, because any leak could compromise the mission and get Jason killed. In Scenario A, Valentine is acting out of a twisted sense of nobility and survival. He knows that if he successfully brings Jason back, Z will owe him an unpayable debt, effectively wiping his slate clean forever. Continuing with scenario A, we have to consider the sheer mechanics of how Valentine would pull this off. He would have to travel through the absolute worst criminal underbellies, utilizing his old contacts and mercenary networks. He would be hunting ghosts. Every step he takes would be a calculated move to bypass the WSB's internal surveillance. This implies that the writers are setting up a massive, unseen adventure that will only be revealed later. Imagine the psychological toll this would take on Valentine, operating in complete isolation, knowing that if he fails, both he and Jason will be erased from existence. But if he succeeds, the payoff is astronomical. He would not just be returning to Port Charles, he would be returning as a conquering hero, the man who outsmarted the entire corrupt intelligence community. This scenario gives Valentine a path to redemption that is deeply rooted in his core competency, ruthless efficiency. While Valentine is out executing this phantom operation, we cannot ignore the shattered trust he leaves behind in Port Charles. Carly and Charlotte are going to be left dealing with the emotional wreckage of his sudden departure. They will believe the lie. They will think he abandoned them to save his own skin. This is a brilliant psychological motive for the writers to explore. The angst and the betrayal will simmer for months. Carly might go on a warpath, demanding answers from Z, completely unaware that Z and Valentine are working together. Z will likely play mind games with Carly, feigning ignorance and maintaining the illusion that Valentine is a wanted fugitive. This deliberate deception protects the mission but deeply traumatizes those who care about Valentine. It is a harsh, unforgiving strategy, but in the world of high-stakes espionage, collateral damage is always part of the equation. But you guys know I never take the surface narrative at face value. We must pivot and examine scenario B, which is significantly more sinister. Could it be that Z is not the desperate, well-intentioned leader he portrays himself to be? In scenario B, Z is actually the mastermind behind the entire WSB corruption. What if Z is the one who buried the files regarding Jason? What if Z is intentionally keeping Jason off the board because Jason poses a threat to his ultimate agenda? If this is the case, Z sending Valentine on a mission to find Jason is not a rescue operation, it is a suicide mission. Z might be using Valentine to flush out the remaining loyalists, or perhaps he intends for Valentine and Jason to destroy each other. This implies that Valentine is walking blindly into a meticulously crafted trap, believing he is earning his freedom when he is actually digging his own grave. If scenario B is indeed the reality, the psychological motive shifts entirely. Z becomes a master manipulator, playing a deadly game of chess, where Valentine is nothing more than a disposable pawn. But here is where the logic gets truly fascinating. Valentine is far too intelligent to remain a pawn for long. If you ask me, Valentine will eventually sniff out the deception. He will realize that the intel Z is feeding him is flawed, that the breadcrumbs are leading him into ambushes. Once Valentine figures out that Z has an ulterior motive, the dynamic flips. Valentine will no longer be working for Z, he will be working to dismantle Z. He will still seek out Jason, not to return him to the WSB, but to forge a secret alliance. Imagine Valentine and Jason, two men who have been betrayed by the system, teaming up in the shadows to take down the very head of the organization. We also have to weave Brennan into this complex tapestry. Whether we are looking at scenario A or scenario B, Brennan is a massive wild card. He has his own connections, his own secrets, and a very murky history with the intelligence community. Could it be that Brennan knows exactly where Jason is being held? Perhaps Brennan is the one pulling the strings of the rogue faction, holding Jason? If Valentine realizes that the answers lie with Brennan, we might see a terrifying shadow war between Valentine and the operatives working for Brennan. This calculated move would explain why Brennan has been acting so suspiciously, and why he seems to anticipate the WSB's every move. Brennan thrives on chaos, and the unforeseen fallout of Valentine digging into his hidden operations could expose secrets that have been buried for decades. Regardless of whether scenario A or scenario B plays out, the endgame remains the same. The grand return. The writers are clearly setting the stage for a massive, jaw-dropping moment. When Valentine finally returns to Port Charles, he will not be alone. The visual of Valentine walking through those doors with Jason by his side would be nothing short of iconic. It would instantly recontextualize months of storytelling. Everyone who doubted Valentine, everyone who cursed his name for running away, would be forced to eat their words. They would realize that his disappearance was the ultimate sacrifice, He gave up his reputation, his family, and his comfort to dive into the abyss and retrieve a man who was essentially the heart of Port Charles. This return would completely shift the balance of power, leaving the corrupt elements of the WSB scrambling for cover. Let us take a moment to analyze why the WSB requires this level of subterfuge in the first place. The institutional failure here is staggering. An agency designed to protect the world has become its own greatest threat. The Shattered Trust is not just between characters, it is a fundamental breakdown of the show's lore. For years, the WSB was the cavalry. Now, they are the villains, or at the very least, a highly compromised entity. By having Z rely on a known criminal like Valentine to clean up their mess, the writers are making a profound statement about the nature of justice in this universe. It implies that true loyalty and effectiveness can no longer be found within the law. They can only be found in the gray areas, operated by men who have nothing left to lose. And what about the psychological state of Jason during all of this? If he has been held in a black site, completely cut off from the world, his mindset will be incredibly volatile. Being rescued by Valentine, a man he has historically had zero reason to trust, will create a fascinating dynamic. Jason will have to rely on his instincts to determine if Valentine is a genuine savior or just another warden transferring him to a new prison. The journey back to Port Charles will be fraught with tension as these two alpha males navigate their forced alliance. Every decision they make will be a calculated move to ensure their mutual survival against an agency that wants them both silenced. If you ask me, we are not getting a neat and tidy resolution anytime soon. The writers are playing a very long, very dark game. The idea that Valentine is simply fleeing is a narrative decoy designed for the gullible. Whether he is the loyal secret weapon of Z, as seen in Scenario A, or a rogue operative fighting against the ultimate betrayal of Z in Scenario B, the journey for Valentine is going to be brutal. Do not expect a happy reunion next week, or even next month. Prepare yourselves for a grueling storyline filled with shattered trust, hidden agendas, and unforeseen fallout. The shadows are only going to get deeper, and when the truth finally comes to light, the landscape of Port Charles will be forever changed. The board is set, the game has started, and all we can do now is watch the pieces fall.